5:12 local time, Persian Gulf. Inside the Combat Information Center of a U.S. aircraft carrier, the radar picture changes. A new surface contact appears, then another, then 3 more. In seconds, 5 fast-moving objects begin sliding across the tactical screen, closing from the north at high speed. The radar operator leans in. 5 surface contacts bearing 027. A brief pause, then the update. Speed 28 knots and increasing. This is not normal commercial traffic. Cargo ships do not accelerate together, and they do not move toward a carrier strike group in formation. Inside the carrier's Combat Information Center, the contacts are immediately tagged and tracked. Data streams across the consoles: heading, speed, signal activity. Seconds later, the classification appears: Iranian Navy surface combatants. The range reads 38 nautical miles and falling. Up on the bridge, the sea looks calm. The Persian Gulf stretches out flat and blue under the early morning sun. Sailors stand watch along the rails. Flight deck crews move between parked aircraft, preparing for routine operations. Nothing on the horizon suggests a problem. But inside the ship's sensor network, the situation is already shifting. A calm voice breaks the silence on the bridge. 5 Iranian naval vessels approaching from the north. No one raises their voice. They do not need to. The captain steps toward the tactical display near the helm and studies the data without urgency. Carrier strike groups live by a simple rule: never rush, never panic. The carrier holds course, cutting through the water at 20 knots. 2 guided missile destroyers patrol the outer defensive ring, while a cruiser monitors surface and air contacts from several miles away. Every radar in the formation is now focused on the same 5 ships. At 5:16, the first electronic signals begin appearing on the consoles. The Iranian vessels have activated their surface search radars. Low power, wide sweep. They are scanning the carrier group. The electronic warfare officer begins logging the emissions. Radar signature confirmed. Iranian naval pattern. The carrier group does not respond yet. Distance to contact drops to 30 nautical miles, then 27. On the radar display, the 5 Iranian ships maintain a tight line abreast formation, moving side by side like steel arrows aimed directly at the American fleet. That formation alone draws attention. It is not random movement, it is deliberate pressure. At 5:18, the first radio hail is sent over international maritime frequencies. Iranian naval vessels. This is a United States Navy carrier strike group operating in international waters. You are approaching at high speed. Alter course immediately. The channel stays silent. No reply. The radar operator updates the track again. Contacts accelerating. Now 31 knots. That speed is unusual for routine patrol movement. It means the Iranian ships are pushing harder, closing faster. Inside the Combat Information Center, the closest point of approach begins updating in real time. CPA, 12 nautical miles. Time to CPA, 14 minutes. On the bridge, the captain watches the numbers change, then gives his first order. Maintain course. No change in speed, no change in direction. The message is clear. The carrier strike group will not be pushed off its line. At 5:21, the Iranian formation begins to change shape. Instead of remaining in a straight line, the ships start spreading out. One moves slightly west, another drifts east. The pattern slowly bends into a broad arc. The tactical officer watches closely. They're spreading. Another officer finishes the thought. Pressure formation, possible encirclement posture. The Iranian ships are no longer simply approaching, they are positioning. On the radar screen, the arc widens as the 5 vessels adjust course, forming the beginning of a loose semicircle around the carrier group. Distance now reads 21 nautical miles, and still closing. At 5:24, the electronic warfare console lights up again. A narrow radar beam sweeps across the strike group. Different frequency, stronger signal. The operator looks up. Possible targeting radar sweep. The room goes quiet. Targeting radar is one step closer to a direct threat. It is not an engagement, but it is a message. Up on the bridge, the captain responds immediately. Set Condition 3. The order moves across the carrier and its escorts at once. Condition 3 means all key combat stations are manned. Missile crews move into position. Radar operators lock onto the approaching vessels. On the deck of the nearest destroyer, the large 5-inch gun turns slowly toward the horizon. Not enough to threaten, just enough to be noticed. The carrier continues ahead, steady and unmoved. Inside the Combat Information Center, the radar updates again. CPA, 9 nautical miles. But something else appears. A new contact lifts off from the deck of one of the Iranian ships. The radar operator zooms in. The track climbs rapidly above the waterline. Air contact just launched from one of the Iranian vessels. A brief pause, then confirmation. Iranian naval helicopter heading toward the carrier. The helicopter rises above the warship, rotor blades cutting wide circles in the morning air. From the radar consoles inside the carrier, the new contact is instantly tagged. Altitude, 200 feet, speed 80 knots. Heading directly toward the strike group. The operator tightens the tracking box. Air contact confirmed. Up on the flight deck, the distant silhouette becomes visible against the pale horizon. At first, it is only a dark speck above the water, but its direction is unmistakable. It is coming straight in. Inside the Combat Information Center, nobody reacts emotionally. Every movement follows procedure refined through years of training. The tactical officer studies the screen. Helicopter range, 16 nautical miles. Another officer responds immediately. Recommend airborne intercept. The captain nods once. Launch the fighters. Within seconds, the order races across the ship. Flight deck, scramble 2. On the vast deck, yellow shirt directors move with sudden urgency. Deck crews wave glowing wands as the first FA-18 Super Hornet is rolled into position. Steam hisses along the catapult track. Pilots climb into their cockpits while ground crews complete final safety checks. Above them, the Iranian helicopter continues closing. Inside the Combat Information Center, the distance shrinks to 14 nautical miles. At the same time, the 5 Iranian warships continue their maneuver. Their formation widens further, the semicircle stretching across miles of water. They are no longer just approaching. They are shaping the scene. At 5:29, the first Super Hornet launches. The catapult fires with a thunderous burst, throwing the jet forward in a blur of steel and vapor. Seconds later, the second fighter follows, climbing sharply into the sky above the strike group. Within moments, both aircraft are racing toward the helicopter, altitude rising fast, speed pushing past 400 knots. From the Iranian helicopter cockpit, the approaching fighters would now be impossible to ignore. But the helicopter does not turn. It keeps coming. Inside the Combat Information Center, a new alert flashes across the electronic warfare console. Surface radar emissions are increasing. The Iranian ships have intensified their scanning. Multiple sensors now sweep across the American formation. The electronic warfare officer begins logging frequencies. 5 ships scanning, pattern consistent with targeting search. Not a weapons lock, but close enough to command attention. Distance continues to fall, 9 nautical miles. On radar, 2 of the Iranian vessels change course again, edging closer to the carrier's projected path. Their wakes trail behind them in long white lines across the dark water. One of the destroyer escorts reports visual confirmation. Iranian ships maneuvering aggressively. High above, the 2 American fighters approach the helicopter from opposite angles. The lead pilot checks the distance. 3 miles. His voice remains calm on the radio. Iranian helicopter, you are approaching a United States carrier strike group. Alter course immediately. There is no response. Instead, the helicopter banks slightly and descends, dropping to barely 100 feet above the waves. Inside the Combat Information Center, the radar officer tracks the change. Helicopter now low profile. That maneuver reduces radar visibility, but it also projects confidence. The fighters hold above it now, faster, higher, fully in control. They are not there to strike. They are there to monitor. Below them, the Iranian warships continue forward. 7 nautical miles. 6. Inside the Combat Information Center of the closest destroyer escort, a new radar sweep crosses the formation. Stronger this time. The electronic warfare officer's tone tightens. Possible targeting radar spike from 1 Iranian vessel. The room goes quiet again. Targeting radar means the ship's onboard systems may now be calculating firing solutions. Still not a launch. Still not an exchange. But another step closer. At 5:33, something else appears on radar. Small, fast. The operator zooms in. 4 tiny contacts break away from one of the Iranian ships and begin racing across the water, speed climbing rapidly. 30 knots, then 40. The tactical officer recognizes the pattern instantly. Multiple small surface craft deploying. On the radar screen, the contacts spread like arrows. 4 Iranian fast attack boats are now charging toward the carrier strike group at full speed. Distance, 5 nautical miles, and closing fast. Inside the Combat Information Center, the tracking display fills with motion. 4 small surface contacts, speed 40 knots, heading directly toward the carrier. On the sea, the boats are still barely visible. Thin gray shapes skipping across the water, trailing long white wakes. But on radar, their intent is unmistakable. These are the kinds of boats built to close quickly and apply pressure at very short range. The tactical officer speaks calmly. Recommends surface response posture. The captain answers without hesitation. Execute. Across the formation, systems begin to move. One of the Arleigh Burke-class destroyers edges slightly ahead of the carrier's path, placing itself between the incoming boats and the carrier. Its radar locks onto the craft instantly. Inside its combat information center, the fire control system begins calculating range and speed. No weapons are released, but everything is ready. On the destroyer's forward deck, the 5-inch gun rotates with quiet precision. From the fast boat's perspective, the meaning would be obvious. A warning without words. Above them, the 2 Super Hornets circle tightly, holding altitude while observing the boats below. One pilot dips lower for a better visual. The radio opens again. Iranian vessels approaching a United States carrier strike group. Reduce speed immediately. The call is repeated, first in English, then in Persian. No response. On radar, the boats keep closing. 4 nautical miles. 3. Inside the destroyer's combat information center, the closest point of approach updates again. CPA, 1 nautical mile. Too close. At that range, even small boats become unpredictable. The tactical officer studies the speed readout. They're not slowing. The destroyer's captain gives the order in an even voice. Prepare warning shot. The command moves instantly through the ship. On the forward deck, the gun crew locks the cannon into firing position. Coordinates are entered into the fire control computer. Target point, open water directly ahead of the approaching boats. No impact on the craft themselves, just a wall of water. At 5:36, the gun fires. The blast rolls across the Persian Gulf like thunder. A single shell arcs low over the sea. Seconds later, it slams into the water several hundred meters in front of the Iranian boats. A towering column of white spray erupts into the air. The effect is immediate. Inside the combat information center, radar confirms a sudden change in speed. The boats hesitate. One veers slightly to port. Another drifts to starboard. But 2 continue forward. Distance now, 2 nautical miles. Above the scene, another aircraft joins. From the carrier's deck, a Seahawk helicopter lifts into the air, rotors hammering the warm Gulf air. Within seconds, it accelerates forward, flying low toward the fast boats. The Seahawk drops to just 200 feet above the surface and closes rapidly. Inside the cockpit, the sensor operator activates the electro-optical system. The picture sharpens. 4 gray hulls, crew members visible on deck, engines roaring. The pilot banks hard, placing the helicopter between the boats and the carrier. Then comes the warning. A narrow green beam flashes across the lead boat. The helicopter's laser designator settles on the bridge windows, non-lethal but impossible to miss. The radio transmission follows at once. Iranian fastcraft, you are approaching a United States carrier strike group in an unsafe manner. Reduce speed and alter course immediately. The Seahawk circles once, the green beam briefly touching the other boats as well. Inside the destroyer's combat information center, the radar picture remains tense. 2 boats begin slowing. The other 2 keep coming. Distance, 1.5 nautical miles. Then a sharp spike appears on the electronic warfare console. The operator looks up instantly. Radar emission from 1 Iranian warship increasing. Another officer checks the frequency. The tone is different this time, tighter, more precise. The electronic warfare officer chooses his words carefully. Possible targeting radar lock. Inside the combat information center, the room falls silent. A targeting lock means the Iranian ship may now be preparing its weapon system. Not a launch, not yet, but very close. Above the water, the Seahawk continues circling. The 2 remaining fast boats are now just over a mile from the destroyer escort. Behind them, one of the larger Iranian warships slowly turns its bow toward the carrier strike group. Then something moves on its deck. A hatch opens along the ship's centerline. Inside the combat information center, the radar operator narrows his eyes. Possible launcher activity on Iranian vessel. The captain looks toward the tactical display. For a moment, no one speaks. Then the electronic warfare officer says what everyone is thinking. Targeting radar confirmed. The atmosphere inside the combat information center changes instantly. Not louder, not chaotic, just sharper. Fire control quality tracking confirmed. On the tactical display, a narrow beam from the Iranian warship is now fixed on the carrier strike group. That signal means one thing. The targeting computer is calculating a firing solution. The captain gives the next order quietly. Set condition 1. Across the entire strike group, the command spreads in seconds. Condition 1. Full combat readiness. Missile crews move into position. Radar operators lock every Iranian vessel now within range. Fire control systems align automatically. No one opens fire, but every system is ready. Above the water, the Seahawk continues circling low over the Iranian speedboats. The green laser still pulses across the lead vessel's bridge windows. Inside the cockpit, the pilot checks the range marker. 1.2 nautical miles. Too close. The radio transmission goes out again. Iranian fastcraft, you are approaching a United States carrier strike group in an unsafe manner. Alter course immediately. For a moment, nothing changes. The 2 lead boats continue surging forward. Behind them, the larger Iranian warship holds its turn toward the American formation. On its deck, the launcher hatch remains open. Inside the destroyer escort, every movement is tracked. CPA updates again. Closest point of approach, under 1 nautical mile. At that distance, reaction time collapses to seconds. Above, the 2 Super Hornets shift position and drop lower. Their engines rumble across the sky as they pass over the Iranian boats in a fast, controlled flyby. Not reckless, but unmistakable. A reminder of the aircraft overhead. Inside the Seahawk, the sensor operator zooms in tighter. Faces become visible on the boats. Men gripping railings, engines still roaring. Then something changes. The lead boat slows, not dramatically, but enough for the destroyer's radar operator to catch it. Speed dropping, 40 knots to 32. Seconds later, the second boat does the same. The Seahawk circles again, holding position. The green laser remains steady. Another call goes out. Reduce speed immediately. For several long seconds, the boats continue sliding forward through their own wake. Then the lead vessel turns slightly, only a few degrees. Not enough to retreat, but no longer pointing directly at the carrier strike group. Inside the destroyer's combat information center, the radar officer calls it out. Lead craft altering heading. Another operator confirms. Speed now 28 knots. The tension in the room does not vanish, but it shifts, because the radar console still shows something else. The Iranian warship behind the boats continues transmitting its targeting beam. Locked, focused. Inside the electronic warfare station, the operator watches the frequency carefully. Then suddenly the signal disappears. No warning, no fade, just silence. The targeting radar shuts down. The operator checks again. Radar lock lost. On the water, the change spreads slowly through the Iranian formation. The 2 fast boats pull back their throttles. The spray around their hulls settles. They begin drifting sideways across the waves. Behind them, the larger Iranian warship that had opened its launcher hatch starts turning away, slowly and carefully. The hatch closes. Inside the carrier strike group, every system continues tracking. On the bridge, the captain does not celebrate. He simply watches. At 5:41, the first Iranian warship completes its turn away. Then the second. Then the third. The semicircle that had been tightening around the strike group starts to break apart. Distance begins increasing, 1 nautical mile. 2. 3. Above the scene, the Seahawk makes one last orbit around the slowing boats. The green laser disappears. The helicopter climbs slightly and banks back toward the carrier. Inside the Combat Information Center, the radar operator exhales quietly. The tactical officer studies the screen. Contacts withdrawing. For several moments, the carrier strike group holds formation. Weapons remain ready. Systems remain locked. But the immediate danger is fading. 5 Iranian warships that had closed in aggressively only minutes earlier are now moving steadily away across the Persian Gulf. No missiles launched, no direct exchange. Just a tense encounter that came dangerously close to becoming something far worse. Inside the Combat Information Center, one officer sums it up in a low voice. They tested the line. The captain looks at the radar display one last time before turning away. And they found it. For several minutes after the Iranian ships begin pulling away, the strike group does not change course. Not a single correction. Not a single celebration. Inside the Combat Information Center, every radar console remains fixed on the withdrawing contacts. Distance increases slowly. 3 nautical miles. 4. 5. The 5 Iranian warships that had been closing in only moments earlier now spread out across the horizon, their formation loosening as they head back toward open water. Above them, the 2 Super Hornets continue circling at altitude, engines humming steadily in the warm Gulf air. Their radar systems track the retreating ships while the Seahawk returns to the carrier, climbing to 500 feet. Inside the helicopter, the sensor operator saves the final footage. Every movement of the Iranian vessels, every course change, every radar sweep, time-stamped, geo-located, recorded. Back aboard the carrier, the electronic warfare officer studies the captured signals scrolling across the console. What happened on the surface lasted less than 30 minutes, but the information collected during those minutes may matter far more than the confrontation itself. Every radar frequency used by the Iranian ships is now logged. Every emission pattern from their sensors has been captured. And most important of all, the brief targeting lock that crossed the carrier group minutes earlier has been recorded in full detail. To an intelligence officer, that signal is a fingerprint. It reveals the type of targeting system the ship uses, its operating range, the behavior of its signal, even the rhythm of its tracking software. Data like that makes any future encounter more predictable. Inside the Combat Information Center, the tactical officer gives a quiet summary. Electronic signatures confirmed on all 5 vessels. The information moves immediately through the carrier's network to analysts aboard the cruiser escort and far beyond the strike group itself. Overhead, satellites continue observing the Iranian ships as they withdraw toward the coastline. On the bridge, the captain finally gives the next order. Maintain course. The carrier does not pursue. It does not escalate. Instead, the massive ship continues forward through the water, its wake stretching white behind the hull as the strike group returns to its patrol route. Within the hour, flight operations resume. On deck, yellow shirt directors guide another Super Hornet toward the catapult. Steam pours across the flight deck as the aircraft launches skyward, returning the carrier to its familiar rhythm. From miles away, nothing about the scene would suggest that the fleet had come within seconds of a major escalation. But inside the sensors and systems of the strike group, the encounter is already under review. Every radar pulse replayed, every course change examined. Because moments like this are never random. Iranian naval doctrine often relies on pressure tactics, fast boats, close approaches, aggressive radar sweeps designed to test the reactions of larger fleets. Sometimes the goal is political signaling, sometimes it is intelligence collection, and sometimes it is simply a reminder that the Persian Gulf remains one of the most contested waterways on Earth. But this time, the test ran both ways. The Iranian ships approached a U.S. carrier strike group expecting to show presence. Instead, they revealed something else: their radar systems, their response times, their tactics. Information that will now remain permanently inside U.S. Navy databases. Inside the Combat Information Center, the radar screen returns to its quieter pattern of distant shipping lanes and scattered civilian traffic. The 5 Iranian contacts are now more than 20 nautical miles away. Still visible, but no longer an immediate concern. The tactical officer reviews the final report. No weapons fired, no damage, all systems normal. The captain nods once, then turns back toward the horizon. Encounters like this rarely make headlines. There are no explosions, no dramatic launches, just steel ships maneuvering across open water, while hundreds of sensors quietly record every move. But in modern naval operations, those quiet moments often matter the most. Because the next encounter will come somewhere across the same waters. And when it does, both sides will remember just how close this one came to crossing the line.